What caused the first cause? On the assumption that all happens by cause, it is easy to discover the nearest determinants of any particular act or state and to trace it plainly back to them. This could be the crudest explanation of the law of cause and effect. In 1934, W.T. Stace, professor of philosophy at Princeton University, in a critical history of Greek philosophy, wrote, and I quote, "Every student of logic knows that this is the ultimate canon of the sciences, the foundation of them all. If we did not believe the truth of causation, namely, everything which has a beginning has a cause, and that in the same circumstances the same things invariably happen, all the sciences would at once crumble to dust. In every scientific investigation, this truth is assumed." End quote. Hello, I am Daisy, your hostess. This video is a continuation, so to speak, of Plotinus Enneads, which is simply 6 treatises containing the collection of writings of the philosopher Plotinus, edited and compiled by his student Porphyry, circa 270 AD. These are grouped in sections of 9. These texts delve into complex metaphysical, ethical, and psychological themes, reflecting Plotinus's development of hierarchical framework of reality. They are spread throughout in my channel. Each is unique and thought-provoking, and can stand alone to provide hours of contemplation and soul-searching. And realizing the human timeline at that time, that Plato was before Jesus. Philosophy and religion were not seen as separate, not even in Jesus' time. They were distinct disciplines, but rather as interwoven aspects of a single unified pursuit of truth and understanding. Ancient Greek thinkers drew on religious myths, rituals, and practices to construct new philosophical ideas, and there was no strict separation between religion and the state. The concept of separation of church and state may have not a specific date or event, if we look back at it, but rather a principle that developed over time. While here in the United States, the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, it was ratified in 1791, explicitly prohibiting the establishment of a state-sponsored religion. The principle of church and state separation didn't fully take shape until the early 19th century. That's bananas slow as molasses. According to scholars, Plato did not offer a formal mystery school in the traditional sense. He established the Platonic Academy, a philosophical school which was open to the public and focused on a broad range of subjects. Some say he drew inspiration from and may have engaged with mystery cults like the Eleusinian mysteries and Orphic cults. This being interpreted to be so, particularly from the diadema passage in the Symposium, and his discussions of the soul's relationship with the divine. While his approach was more focused on rational inquiry and philosophical discourse, minus the rituals. Another thing to take into account is that Christianity was not a structured religion during Plato's time. Again, talking about that, it emerged in the 1st century AD. Plato lived during the classical period of ancient Greece, where polytheistic paganism centered around the worship of numerous gods and goddesses like Zeus, Athena, Apollo, and others. While not structured as organized religion in the modern sense, it involved a system of myths, rituals, and beliefs that shaped Greek society and its culture. I bring this up to bring the past to the present and see it for what it is, or for what it was, and how it served as foundations for where we are today. Having said that, we go back from Plato, BC, and fast forward to Plotinus, AD. Plotinus was not the first to ponder on the aspect of cause and effect. Plato's philosophy, who we just discussed for a bit, greatly influenced Plotinus. He explored the idea of cause and effect through his theory of forms, where the forms are the ultimate cause of the things we perceive. I wonder if when Plato discussed his theory of forms, if he was way ahead of our time in understanding that thoughts are things. What do you think? Anyone that looks at any man-made concept and who owns a humble heart can quickly understand that no person presently alive can give self credit for his or her achievement aside from the effort, clearly any progress made is because we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, laying foundations, ideas, and conjectures. Even as we look at this concept of cause and effect, we can see how gradually, through generational discussion down from Plato, born in 428, 427 BC, followed by Aristotle, who lived from 384 to 322 BC, with his concept of efficient cause, aligning with the idea that every event has a specific cause that brings it into being, and then into Plotinus, who lived from 204 to 270 CE, who continues the conversation. The law of cause and effect has been discussed and investigated for millennia. Through these philosophical contributions, to mention also a well-known scientific figure like Isaac Newton, born in 1642 CE, Newton's law of motion, which include his third law, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, are a foundational scientific expression of cause and effect. And this followed by Immanuel Kant and to our present-day philosophers. Now circling back to Plotinus Ennead, in what context is his response referring to the cause of all? He follows it by stating the general cause of all is nature. Let that be the general thought as we unfold Plotinus's Enneads, and now I turn the page. The Enneads of Plotinus, translated by Stephen McKenna. The Fourth Ennead, First Tractate, on the Essence of the Soul. 1. In the intellectual cosmos dwells the authentic essence with the intellectual principle, divine mind, as the noblest of its content, but containing also souls, since every soul in this lower sphere has come thence, that is the world of unembodied souls, while to our world belong those that have entered body and undergone bodily division. There the intellectual principle is a concentrated all, nothing of it distinguished or divided. And in that cosmos of unity, all souls are concentrated also, with no spatial discrimination. But there is a difference. The intellectual principle is forever repugnant to distinction and to partition. Soul, there without distinction and partition, has yet a nature lending itself to divisional existence. Its division is succession, entry into body. In view of this seceding and ensuing partition, we may legitimately speak of it as a partible thing. But if so, how can it still be described as indivisible? In that the succession is not of the soul entire. Something of it holds its ground, that in it which recoils from separate existence. Formed from the undivided essence and the essence divided among bodies. This description of soul must therefore mean that it has phases above and below, that it is attached to the supreme and yet reaches down to this sphere like a radius from a center. Thus it is that, entering this realm, it possesses still the vision inherent to that superior phase in virtue of which it unchangingly maintains its integral nature. Even here it is not exclusively the partible soul, it is still the impartible as well. What in it knows partition is parted without partibility, undivided as giving itself to the entire body, a whole to a whole. It is divided as being effective in every part. Second Tractate, on the Essence of the Soul, Part 2. 1. In our attempt to elucidate the essence of the soul, we show it to be neither a material fabric nor, among immaterial things, a harmony. The theory that it is some final development, some entelechy, was passed by, holding this to be neither true as presented nor practically definitive. No doubt we make a very positive statement about it when we declare it to belong to the intellectual kind, to be of the divine order, but a deeper penetration of its nature is demanded. In that allocation we were distinguishing things as they fall under the intellectual or the sensible, and we placed the soul in the former class. Now, taking its membership of the intellectual for granted, we must investigate by another path the more specific characteristic of its nature. There are, we hold, things primarily apt to partition, tending by sheer nature towards separate existence. They are things in which no part is identical, either with another or with the whole, while also their part is necessarily less than the total and whole. These are magnitudes of the realm of sense, masses, each of which has a station of its own, so that none can be identically present in entirety at more than one point at one time. But to that order is opposed essence, real being. This is in no degree susceptible of partition. It is unparted and impartible. Interval is foreign to it, cannot enter into our idea of it. It has no need of place and is not, in diffusion or as an entirety, situated within any other being. It is poised over all beings at once, and this is not in the sense of using them as a base, but in their being neither capable nor desirous of existing independently of it. It is an essence eternally unvaried. It is common to all that follows upon it. It is like the circle's center to which all the radii are attached while leaving it unbrokenly in possession of itself. The starting point of their course and of their essential being, the ground in which they all participate. Thus the indivisible is the principle of these divided existences, and in their very outgoing they remain enduringly in contact with that stationary essence. So far we have the primarily indivisible, supreme among the intellectual and authentically existent. And we have at its contrary the kind of earlier rank than the sensible yet near to it and resident within it. An order, not like the body, primarily a thing of part, but becoming so upon incorporation. The bodies are separate, and the ideal form which enters them is correspondingly sundered, while still it is present as one whole in each of its severed parts, since amid that multiplicity in which complete individuality has entailed complete partition, there is a permanent identity. We may think of color, qualities of all kinds, some particular shape, which can be present in many unrelated objects at the one moment, each entire and yet with no community of experience among the various manifestations. In the case of such ideal forms, we may affirm complete partibility. But on the other hand, that first utterly indivisible kind must be accompanied by a subsequent essence engendered by it and holding indivisibility from it, but in virtue of the necessary outgoing from source, tending firmly towards the contrary, the wholly partible. This secondary essence will take an intermediate place between the first substance, the undivided, and that which is divisible in material things and resides in them. Its presence, however, will differ in one respect from that of color and quantity. These, no doubt, are present identically and entire throughout diverse material masses, but each several manifestation of them is a distinct from every other as the mass is from the mass. The magnitude present in any mass is definitely one thing, yet its identity from part to part does not imply any such community as would entail common experience. Within that identity there is diversity, for it is a condition only, not, as in the case of the soul, the actual essence. The essence, very near to the impartible, which we assert to belong to the kind we are now dealing with, is at once an essence and an entrant into body. Upon embodiment, it experiences a partition unknown before it thus bestowed itself. In whatsoever bodies it occupies, even the vastest of all, that in which the entire universe is included, it gives itself to the whole without abdicating its unity. This unity of an essence is not like that of body, which is a unit by the mode of continuous extension, the mode of distinct parts, each occupying its own space. Nor is it such a unity as we have dealt with in the case of quality. The nature, at once divisible and indivisible, which we affirm to be soul, has not the unity of an extended thing. It does not consist of separate sections. Its divisibility lies in its presence at every point of the recipient, but it is indivisible as dwelling entire in the total and entire in any part. To have penetrated this idea is to know the greatness of the soul and its power, the divinity and wonder of its being, as a nature transcending the sphere of things. Itself devoid of mass, it is present to all mass. It exists here and yet is there, and this not in distinct phases, but with unsundered identity. Thus, it is parted and not parted. Or better, it has never known partition, never become a parted thing, but remains a self-gathered integral and is parted among bodies merely in the sense that bodies, in virtue of their own sundered existence, cannot receive it unless in some partitive mode. The partition, in other words, is an occurrence in body, not in soul. 2. It can be demonstrated that soul must necessarily be of just this nature, and that there can be no other soul than such a being, one neither wholly impartible nor wholly partible, but both at once. If it had the nature of body, it would consist of isolated members, each unaware of the conditions of every other. There would be a particular soul, says a soul of the finger, answering as a distinct and independent entity to every local experience. In general terms, there would be a multiplicity of souls administering each individual, and moreover, the universe would be governed not by one soul, but by an incalculable number, each standing apart to itself, but without a dominant unity. Continuity is meaningless. The theory that impressions reach the leading principle by progressive stages must be dismissed as mere illusion. In the first place, it affirms without investigation a leading phase of the soul. What can justify this assigning of parts to the soul and distinguishing one part from another? What quantity or what difference of quality can apply to a thing defined as a self-consistent whole of unbroken unity? Again, would perception be vested in that leading principle alone or in the other phases as well? If a given experience bears only on that leading principle, it would not be felt as lodged in any particular members of the organism. If, on the other hand, it fastens on some other phase of the soul, one not constituted for sensation, that phase cannot transmit any experience to the leading principle, and there can be no sensation. Again, suppose sensation vested in the leading principle itself, then a first alternative, it will be felt in some one part of that some specifically sensitive phase, the other part excluding a perception which would serve no purpose, or in the second alternative, there will be many distinct sensitive phases, an infinite number, with difference from one to another. In that second case, one sensitive phase will declare, I had this sensation primarily. Others will have to say, I felt the sensation that rose elsewhere. But either the site of the experience will be a matter of doubt to every phase except the first, or each of the parts of the soul will be deceived into allocating the occurrence within its own particular sphere. If, on the contrary, the sensation is vested not merely in the leading principle, but in any and every part of the soul, what special function raises the one rather than the other into that leading rank, or why is the sensation to be referred to it rather than elsewhere? And how, at this account for the unity of the knowledge brought into by diverse senses, by eyes, by ears? On the other hand, if the soul is a perfect unity, utterly strange to part, a self-gathered whole, if it continuously eludes all touch of multiplicity and divisibility, then no whole taken up into it can ever be ensouled. Soul will stand as circle center to every object, remote on the circumference, and the entire mass of a living being is soulless still. There is, therefore, no escape. Soul is, in the degree indicated, one and many, parted and impartible. We cannot question the possibility of a thing being at once a unity and multi-present, since to deny this would be to abolish the principle which sustains and administers the universe. There must be a kind which encircles and supports all and conducts all with wisdom, a principle which is multiple since existence is multiple, and yet is one soul always since a container must be a unity. By the multiple unity of its nature, it will furnish life to the multiplicity of the series of an all. By its impartible unity, it will conduct a total to wise ends. In the case of things not endowed with intelligence, the leading principle is their mere unity, a lower reproduction of the soul's efficiency. This is the deeper meaning of the profound passage in the Timaeus, where we read, "By blending the impartible, eternally unchanging essence with that indivision among bodies, he produced a third form of essence partaking of both qualities." Soul, therefore, is, in this definite sense, one and many. The ideal form resident in body is many and one. Bodies themselves are exclusively many. The Supreme is exclusively one. Third Tractate. Problems of the Soul. Part 1. 1. The soul. What dubious questions concerning it admit of solution, or where we must abide our doubt, with at least the gain of recognizing the problem that confronts us? This is matter well worth attention. On what subject can we more reasonably expend the time required by minute discussion and investigation? Apart from much else, it is enough that such an inquiry illuminates two grave questions: of what sphere the soul is the principle, and whence the soul itself springs. Moreover, we will be only obeying the ordinance of the God who bade us know ourselves. Our general instinct to seek and learn will, in all reason, set us inquiring into the nature of the instrument with which we search. So, equally will our longing to possess ourselves of the adorable vision of the intellectual principle. Even in the universal intellect, divine mind, there was duality, so that we would expect differences of condition in things of part. How some things rather than others come to be receptacles of the divine beings will need to be examined. But all this we may leave aside until we are considering the mode in which souls comes to occupy body. For the moment, we return to our argument against those who maintain our souls to be offshoots from the soul of the universe, parts and not an identity modally parted. Our opponents will probably deny the validity of our arguments against the theory that human soul is a mere segment of the all soul. The considerations, namely, that it is of identical scope, and that it is intellective in the same degree, supposing them even to admit that equality of intellection. They will object that parts must necessarily fall under one ideal form with their wholes, and they will adduce Plato as expressing their view where, in demonstrating that the all is ensouled, he says, as our body is a portion of the body of the all, so our soul is a portion of the soul of the all. It is admitted on clear evidence that we are born along by the circuit of the all. We will be told that, taking character and destiny from it, strictly inbound with it, we must derive our souls also from what thus bears us up, and that as within ourselves every part absorbs from our soul, so analogically we, standing as part to the universe, absorb from the soul of the all as parts of it. They will urge also that the dictum, "the collective soul cares for all the unensouled," carries the same implication and could be uttered only in the belief that nothing whatever of later origin stands outside the soul of the universe. The only soul there can be there to concern itself with the unensouled. 2. To this, our first answer is that to place certain things under one identical class by admitting an identical range of operation is to make them of one common species and puts an end to all mention of part. The reasonable conclusion would be, on the contrary, that there is one identical soul, every separate manifestation being that soul complete. Let our opponents once admit the unity. They will go on to make it dependent on a principle, soul absolute, in which we have no longer the soul of this or that, but a soul of nowhere, a soul belonging neither to the cosmos nor to anything else, and yet vested with the creation of the whatever serves as soul to the cosmos and to every ensouled thing. The soul considered as an entirety cannot be a soul of any one given thing, since it is an essence, a divine real being, or at least there must be a soul which is not exclusively the soul of any particular thing, and those attached to particulars must so belong merely in some mode of accident. In such questions as this, it is important to clarify the significance of part. Part, as understood of body, uniform or varied, need not detain us. It is enough to indicate that, when part is mentioned in respect of things whose members are alike, it refers to mass and not to ideal form, specific idea. Take, for example, whiteness. The whiteness in a portion of milk is not a part of the whiteness of milk in general. We have the whiteness of a portion, not a portion of whiteness. For whiteness is utterly without magnitude, has nothing whatever to do with quantity. That is all we need to say with regard to part in material things. But part in the unembodied may be taken in various ways. We may think of it in the sense familiar in numbers, 2, a part of the standard 10, in abstract numbers of course, or as we think of a segment of a circle or line, abstractly considered, or again, of a section or branch of knowledge. In the case of the units of reckoning and of geometrical figure, exactly as in that of corporeal masses, partition must diminish the total. The part must be less than the whole, for these are things of quantity, and have their being as things of quantity, and, since they are not the ideal form quantity, they are subject to increase and decrease. Now, in such a sense as this, part cannot be affirmed of the soul. The soul is not a thing of quantity. We are not to conceive of the all soul as some standard 10 with particular souls as its constituent units. Such a conception would entail many absurdities. The 10 could not be essentially a unity. The soul would be an aggregation, not a self-standing real being. And further, unless every one of the single constituents were itself an all soul, the all soul would be formed of non-souls. Again, it is admitted that the particular soul, this part of the all soul, is of one ideal form with it. But this does not entail the relation of part to whole, since in objects formed of continuous parts there is nothing inevitably making any portion uniform with the total. Take, for example, the parts of a circle or square. We may divide it in different ways so as to get our part. A triangle need not be divided into triangles. All sorts of different figures are possible, yet an absolute uniformity is admitted to reign throughout soul. In a line, no doubt, the part is inevitably a line, but even here there is a necessary difference in size, and if in the case of the soul we similarly called upon magnitude as the distinction between constituents and collective soul, then soul, thus classed by magnitude, becomes quantitative and is simply body. But it is admitted that all souls are alike and are entireties. Clearly, soul is not subject to part in the sense in which magnitudes are. Our opponents themselves would not consent to the notion of the all soul being whittled down into fragments, yet this is what they would be doing, annulling the all soul, if any collective soul existed at all, making it a mere piece of terminology, thinking of it like wine separated into many portions, each portion in its jar, being described as a portion of the total thing, wine. Next, there is the conception of the individual soul as a part in the sense in which we speak of some single proposition as a part of the science entire. The theorem is separate, but the science stands as one undivided thing, the separation into theorems being simply the act of making each constituent notion explicit and efficient. This is partition without severance. Each item potentially includes the whole science, which itself remains an unbroken total. Is this the appropriate parallel? Yes. In such a relationship, the all-soul, of which the particular souls are to be a part, will not be the soul of any definite thing, but an entity standing aloof. That means that it will not even be the soul of the cosmos, since this will be itself one of those partial souls. Thus, all alike, cosmic soul and particular souls will be partial and of one nature. Then why, we may be asked, does one soul belong to the cosmos and the rest only to parts of the cosmos? 3. Is it a question of part in the sense that, taking one living being, the soul in a finger might be called a part of the soul entire? And this would carry the alternative that either there is no soul outside of body or that no soul being within body. The thing described as the soul of the universe is, nonetheless, outside the body of the universe. That is a point to be investigated. But for the present, we must consider what kind of soul this parallel would give us. If the particular soul is part of the all soul, only in the sense that this bestows itself upon all living things of the partial sphere, such a self-bestowal does not imply division. On the contrary, it is the identical soul that is present everywhere, the one complete thing, multi-present at the one moment. There is no longer question of a soul that is a part against soul that is an all, especially where an identical power is present. Even difference in function, as in eyes and ears, cannot warrant the assertion of distinct parts concerned in each separate act. Such allotment we may leave to others. All is met by the notion of one identical thing, but a thing in which a distinct power operates in each separate function. All the powers are present either in seeing or in hearing. The difference in impression received is due to the difference in the organs concerned. All the varying impressions are our various responses to ideal forms that can be taken in a variety of modes. A further proof of the unity of soul is that perception demands a common gathering place. Every organ has its distinct function and is competent only upon its own material, and must interpret each several experience in its own fashion. The judgment upon these impressions must then be vested in some one principle, a judge informed upon all that is said and done. But again, everywhere unity applies both to soul itself and to its various functions. To identify the relation of all soul to particular souls with the relation between a soul and its sensations would entail that no particular soul, but only the all soul, could have thought or knowledge. To localize thought is to recognize the separate existence of the individual soul. But since the soul is a rational soul, by the very same title by which it is an all soul, and is called the rational soul in the sense of being a whole, and so not merely reasoning locally, then what is thought of as a part must in reality be no part, but the identity of an unparted thing. 4. But if this is the true account of the unity of soul, we must be able to meet the problems that ensue. Firstly, the difficulty of one thing being present at the same moment in all things, and secondly, the difficulty of soul in body as against soul not embodied. We might be led to think that all soul must always inhabit body. This would seem especially plausible in the case of the soul of the universe, not thought of as ever leaving its body as the human soul does. There exists, no doubt, an opinion that even the human soul, while it must leave the body, cannot become an utterly disembodied thing. But, assuming its complete disembodiment, how comes it that the human soul can go free of the body, but the old soul not, though they are one and the same? There is no such difficulty in the case of the intellectual principle. By the primal differentiation, this separates, no doubt, into partial things of widely varying nature, but eternal unity is secured by virtue of the eternal identity of that essence. It is not easy to explain how, in the case of the soul described as separate among bodies, such differentiated souls can still remain one thing. A possible solution may be offered. The unit soul, it may be conceived, holds aloof, not actually falling into body. The differentiated souls, the old soul with the others, issue from the unity while still constituting within certain limits and association. They are one soul by the fact that they do not belong unreservedly to any particular being. They meet, so to speak, fringe to fringe. They strike out here and there, but are held together at the source, much as light is a divided thing upon earth, shining in this house and that, and yet remains uninterruptedly one identical substance. The old soul would always remain above, since essentially it has nothing to do with descent or with the lower, or with any tendency towards this sphere. The other souls would become ours, becoming partial, individual in us, because their lot is cast for this sphere and because they give attention to a thing, the body, which requires their care. The one, the lowest soul in the total of the old soul, would correspond to that in some great growth, silently, unlaboriously conducting the whole. Our own lowest soul might be compared to the insect life in some rotted part of the growth, for this is the ratio of the animated body to the universe, while the other soul in us, of one ideal nature with the higher parts of the old soul, may be imaged as the gardener concerned about the insects lodged in the tree and anxiously working to amend what is wrong. Or we may contrast a healthy man living with the healthy and, by his thought or by his act, lending himself to the service of those about him, with on the other side a sick man intent upon his own care and cure, and so living for the body, body-bound. 5. But what place is left for the particular souls, yours and mine and another's? May we suppose the soul to be appropriated on the lower ranges to some individual, but to belong on the higher to that other sphere? At this there would be a Socrates as long as Socrates' soul remained in body, but Socrates ceases to exist precisely on attainment of the highest. Now, nothing of real being is ever annulled. In the Supreme, the intellectual principle are not annulled, for in their differentiation there is no bodily partition, no passing of each separate phase into a distinct unity. Every such phase remains in full possession of that identical being. It is exactly so with the souls. By their succession, they are linked to the several intellectual principles, for they are the expression, the logos of the intellectual principles, of which they are the unfolding. Brevity has opened out to multiplicity, by that point of their being which least belongs to the partial order. They are attached each to its own intellectual original. They have already chosen the way of division, but to the extreme they cannot go. Thus they keep at once identification and difference. Each soul is permanently a unity, a self, and yet all are, in their total, one being. Thus, the gist of the matter is established. One soul, the source of all. Those others, as a many founded in that one, are, on the analogy of the intellectual principle, at once divided and undivided. That soul which abides in the Supreme is the one expression, or logos of the intellectual principle, and from it spring other reason principles, partial but immaterial, exactly as in the differentiation of the Supreme. 6. But how comes it that while the old soul has produced a cosmos, the soul of the particular has not, though it is of the one ideal kind and contains, it too, all things in itself? We have indicated that a thing may enter and dwell at the same time in various places. This ought to be explained, and the inquiry would show how an identity resident simultaneously here and there may, in its separate appearances, act or react, or both, after distinct modes. But the matter deserves to be examined in a special discussion. To return then, how and why has the all-soul produced a cosmos while the particular souls simply administer some one part of it? In the first place, we are not surprised when men of identical knowledge differ greatly in effective power. But the reason, we will be asked. The answer might be that there is a similar difference of degree among souls, the one never having fallen away from the all-soul, but dwelling within it and assuming body therein, while the others received their allotted spheres when the body was already in existence, when their sister soul was already in rule and, as it were, had already prepared habitations for them. Again, the reason may be that the one, the creative all-soul, looks towards the universal intellectual principle, the exemplar of all that can be, while the others are more occupied with the intellectual within themselves, that which is already of the sphere of part. Perhaps, too, these also could have created, but that they were anticipated by the originator, the work accomplished before them, an impediment inevitable whichsoever of the souls were first to operate. But it is safer to account for the creative act by nearer connection with the overworld. The souls whose tendency is exercised within the supreme have the greater power. Immune in that pure seat they create securely, for the greater power takes the least hurt from the material within which it operates, and the power of these souls derives from their remaining enduringly attached to the overworld. It creates, therefore, self-gathered, and the created things gather round it. The other souls, on the contrary, themselves go forth. That can mean only that they have deserted towards the abyss. A main phase in them is drawn downward and pulls them with it in the desire toward the lower. The secondary and tertiary souls, of which we hear, must be understood in the sense of closer or remoter position. It is much as in ourselves the relation to the supreme is not identical from soul to soul. Some of us are capable of becoming uniate, others of striving and almost attaining, while a third rank is much less apt. It is a matter of the degree or powers of the soul by which our expression is determined. The first degree dominant in the one person, the second, the third, the merely animal life in others, while still all of us contain all the powers. 7. So far so good. But what of the passage in the Philebus taken to imply that the other souls are parts of the all-soul? The statement there made does not bear the meaning read into it. It expresses only what the author was then concerned with, that the world is ensouled, a teaching which he maintains in the observation that it is preposterous to make the world soulless when we, who contain a part of the body of the all, have a soul. How, he asks, could there be soul in the part and none in the total? He makes his teaching quite clear in the Timaeus, where he shows us the other souls brought into existence after the all soul, but compounded from the same mixing bowl. Secondary and tertiary are duly marked off from the primal, but every form of soul is presented as being of identical ideal nature with the all soul. As for the saying of the Phaedrus, quote, all that is soul cares for all that is soulless, end quote. This simply tells us that the corporeal kind cannot be controlled, fashioned, set in place, or brought into being by anything but the soul. And we cannot think that there is one soul whose nature includes this power and another without it. The perfect soul, that of the all, we read, going its lofty journey, operates upon the cosmos not by sinking into it, but, as it were, by brooding over it. And every perfect soul exercises this governance. He distinguishes the other, the soul in this sphere, not as a part or as a different thing, but as the soul when its wing is broken. As for our souls being entrained in the cosmic circuit and taking character and condition thence, this is no identification that they are parts. Soul nature may very well take some tincture from even the qualities of place, from water and from air, residence in this city or in that, and the varying makeup of the body may have their influence upon our human souls, which yet are no parts of place or of body. We have always admitted that as members of the universe, we take over something from the old soul. We do not deny the influence of the cosmic circuit. But against all this we oppose another soul in us, the intellectual as distinguished from the merely vitalizing, proven to be distinct by the power of opposition. As for our being begotten children of the cosmos, we answer that in motherhood the entrant soul is distinct. It's not the mother's. 8. These considerations, amounting to the settlement of the question, are not countered by the phenomenon of sympathy. The response between soul and soul is due to the mere fact that all spring from that self-same soul, the next to divine mind, from which springs the soul of the all. We have already stated that the one soul is also multiple, and we have dealt with the different forms of relationship between part and whole. We have investigated the different degrees existing within soul. We may now add briefly that differences might be included also by the bodies with which the soul has to do, and even more, by the character and mental operations carried over from the conduct of the previous lives. The life choice made by a soul has a correspondence, we read, with its former lives. As regards the nature of soul in general, the differences have been defined in the passage in which we mentioned the secondary and tertiary orders and laid down that, while all souls are all comprehensive, each ranks according to its operative phase, one becoming unate in the achieved act, another in knowledge, another in desire, according to the distinct orientation by which each is, or tends to become, what it looks upon. The very fulfillment and perfectionment attainable by souls cannot but be different. But if in the total the organization in which they have their being is compact of variety, as it must be since every reason principle is a unity of multiplicity and variety, and may be thought of as a psychic animated organism having many shapes at its commands, if this is so and all constitutes a system in which being is not cut adrift from being, if there is nothing chance-born among beings as there is none even in bodily organisms, then it follows that number must enter into the scheme. For once again, being must be stable. The members of the intellectual must possess identity, each numerically one. This is the condition of individuality, where, as in bodily masses, the idea is not essentially native, and the individuality is therefore in flux. Existence under ideal form can rise only out of imitation of the authentic existences. These last, on the contrary, not rising out of any such conjunction as the duality of idea and dead matter, have their being in that which is numerically one, that which was from the beginning, and neither becomes what it has not been, nor can cease to be what it is. Even supposing real beings, such as soul, to be produced by some other principle, they are certainly not made from matter, or if they were, the creating principle must infuse into them from within itself something of the nature of real being. But at this it would itself suffer change, as it created more or less. And after all, why should it thus produce at any given moment rather than remain forever stationary? Moreover, the produced total, variable from more to less, could not be an eternal, yet the soul, it stands agreed, is eternal. But what becomes of the soul's infinity if it is thus fixed? The infinity is a matter of power. There is question not of the soul's being divisible into an infinite number of parts, but of an infinite possible effectiveness. It is infinity in the sense in which the supreme God also is free of all bound. This means that it is no external limit that defines the individual being or the extension of souls any more than of God. On the contrary, each in right of its own power is all that it chooses to be, and we are not to think of it as going forth from itself, losing its unity by any partition. The fact is simply that the element within it, which is apt to entrance into body, has the power of immediate projection anywhither. The soul is certainly not wrenched asunder by its presence at once in foot and in finger. Its presence in the all is similarly unbroken. Over its entire range, it exists in every several part of everything, having even vegetal life, even in a part cut off from the main. In any possible segment, it is as it is at its source. For the body of the all is a unit, and soul is everywhere present to it as to one thing. When some animal rots and a multitude of others spring from it, the life principle now present is not the particular soul that was in the larger body. That body has created to be receptive of soul, or there would have been no death. What happens is that whatsoever in the product of the decay is apt material for animal existence of one kind or another becomes ensouled by the fact that soul is nowhere lacking, though a recipient of soul may be. And this new ensouling does not mean, however, an increase in the number of souls. All depend from the one, or rather, all remains one. It is as with ourselves. Some elements are shed, others grow in their place. The soul abandons the discarded and flows into the new coming as long as the one soul of the man holds its ground. In the all, the one soul holds its ground forever. Its distinct contents now retain soul and now rejected, but the total of spiritual beings is unaffected. 9. But we must examine how soul comes to inhabit the body, the manner and the process, a question certainly of no minor interest. The entry of soul into body takes place under two forms. Firstly, there is the entry, metensomatosis, of a soul present in body by change from one wholly material frame to another, or the entry not known as metensomatosis, since the nature of the earlier habitacle is not certainly definable, of a soul leaving an aerial or fiery body for one of earth. Secondly, there's the entry from the wholly bodiless into any kind of body. This is the earliest form of any dealing between body and soul, and this entry especially demands investigation. What then can be thought to have happened when soul, utterly clean from body, first comes into commerce with the bodily nature? It is reasonable, necessary even, to begin with the soul of the all. Notice that if we are to explain and to be clear, we are obliged to use such words as entry and ensoulment, though never was this all unensouled, never did body subsist with soul away, never was their matter unelaborate. We separate the better to understand. There is nothing illegitimate in the verbal and mental sundering of things which must in fact be coexistent. The true doctrine may be stated as follows. In the absence of body, soul could not have gone forth, since there is no other place to which its nature would allow it to descend. Since go forth it must, it will generate a place for itself. At once body also exists. While the soul, as an eternal, a divine being, is at rest, in rest firmly based on repose, the absolute, yet, as we may put it, that huge illumination of the supreme pouring towards comes at last to the extreme born of its high and dwindles to darkness. This darkness, now lying there beneath, the soul sees and by seeing brings to shape, for in the law of things this ultimate depth, neighboring with soul, may not go void of whatsoever degree of that reason principle it can absorb, the dimmed reason of reality at its faintest. Imagine that a stately and varied mansion has been built. It has never been abandoned by its architect, who yet is not tied down to it. He has judged it worthy in all its length and breadth of all the care that can serve to its being, as far as it can share in being, or to its beauty, but a care without burden to its director, who never descends, but presides over it from above. This gives the degree in which the cosmos is ensouled, not by a soul belonging to it, but by one present to it. It is mastered, not master, not possessor, but possessed. The soul bears it up, and it lies within, no fragment of its unsharing. The cosmos is like a net which takes all its life as far as ever it stretches from being wet in the water. It is at the mercy of the sea which spreads out, taking the net which is just so far as it will go, for no mesh of it can strain beyond its set place. The soul is of so far-reaching a nature, a thing unbounded, as to embrace the entire body of the all in the one extension. So as far as the universe extends, their soul is. And if the universe had no existence, the extent of soul would be the same. It is eternally what it is. The universe spreads as broad as the presence of soul. The bound of its expansion is the point at which, in its downward egression from the supreme, it still has soul to bind it in one. It is a shadow as broad as the reason principle proceeding from soul, and that reason principle is of scope to generate a cosmic bulk as vast as lay in the purposes of the idea, the divine forming power which it conveys. 10. In view of all this, we must now work back from the items to the unit, and consider the entire scheme as one enduring thing. Just as in the groups air light sun and moon light sun, the members exist simultaneously, though having degrees of primary, secondary, tertiary, i.e., having a logical or causal sequence, so we have soul eternally unchanging, then graded series like that of fire stretching from primary to ultimate, where the ultimate is conceived as a shadow cast by fire and at once illuminated so that something of the nature of the forming idea of fire hovers over the outcast that at first lay in the blank obscurity. It is brought under the scheme of reason by the efficacy of soul, whose entire extension latently holds this rationalizing power. As we know, the reason principles carried in animal seed fashion and shape living beings into so many universes in the small. For whatsoever touches soul is molded to the nature of soul's own real being. We are not to think that the soul acts upon the object by conformity to any external judgment. There is no pause for willing or planning. Any such procedure would not be an act of sheer nature, but one of applied art. But art is of later origin than soul. It is an imitator, producing dim and feeble copies, toys, things of no great worth, and it is dependent upon all sorts of mechanism by which alone its images can be produced. The soul, on the contrary, is sovereign over material things by might of real being. Their quality is determined by its lead, and those elementary things cannot stand against its will. On the later level, things are hindered one by the other, and thus often fall short of the characteristic shape at which their unextended reason principle must be aiming. In the world as a whole, as distinct from its parts, the entire shape comes from soul, and all that is produced takes and keeps its appointed place in a unity, so that the engendered thing, without labor as without clash, becomes all that it should be. In the world, the soul has elaborated its creation, the images of the gods, dwellings for men, each existing to some peculiar purpose. Soul could produce none but the things which truly represent its powers. Fire produces warmth, another source produces cold. Soul has a double efficacy, its act within itself, and its act from within outwards towards the new production. In soulless entities, the inner act remains dormant, and any efficiency they have is to bring to their own likeness whatever is amenable. All existence has this tendency to bring other things to likeness, but the soul has the distinction of possessing at once an action of conscious attention within itself and an action towards the outer. It has thus the function of giving life to all that does not live by prior right, and the life it gives is commensurate with its own. That is to say, living in reason, it communicates reason to the body, an image of the reason within itself, just as the life given to the body is an image of real being. And it bestows also upon that material the appropriate shapes of which it contains the reason forms. The content of the creative soul includes the ideal shapes of gods and of all else, and hence it is that the cosmos contains all. 11. I think, therefore, that those ancient sages who sought to secure the presence of divine beings by the erection of shrines and statues showed insight into the nature of the all. They perceived that, though this soul is everywhere tractable, its presence will be secured all the more readily when an appropriate receptacle is elaborated, a place especially capable of receiving some portion or phase of it, something reproducing it or representing it and serving like a mirror to catch an image of it. It belongs to the nature of the all to make its entire content reproduce most felicitously the reason principles in which it participates. Every particular thing is the image within matter of a reason principle, which itself images a pre-material reason principle. Thus every particular entity is linked to that divine being in whose likeness it is made, the divine principle which the soul contemplated and contained in the act of each creation. Such a mediation and representation there must happen, since it was equally impossible for the created to be without share in the supreme, and for the supreme to descend into the created. The son of that sphere, let us return to it as our example, is an intellectual principle, and immediately upon it follows the soul depending from it. Stationary soul from stationary intelligence. But the soul borders also upon the son of this sphere, and becomes the medium by which it is linked to the overworld. It plays the part of an interpreter between what emanates from that sphere down to this lower universe, and what rises, as far as through soul anything can, from the lower to the highest. Nothing, in fact, is far away from anything. Things are not remote. There is no doubt the aloofness of difference and of mingled natures as against the unmingled, but selfhood has nothing to do with spatial position, and in unity itself there may still be distinction. These beings, the heavenly bodies, are divine in virtue of cleaving to the supreme, because by the medium of the soul thought of as descending, they remain linked with the primal soul, and through it are veritably what they are called, and possess the vision of the intellectual principle, the single object of contemplation to that soul in which they have their being. 12. The souls of men, seeing their images in the mirror of Dionysius, as it were, have entered into that realm in a leap downward from the supreme. Yet even they are not cut off from their origin, from the divine intellect. It is not that they have come bringing the intellectual principle down in their fall. It is that though they have descended even to earth, yet their higher parts hold forever above the heavens. Their initial descent is deepened, since that mid part of theirs is compelled to labor in care of the care-needing thing into which they have entered. But Zeus, the Father, takes pity on their toils and makes the bonds in which they labor soluble by death, and gives respite in due time, freeing them from the body, that they too may come to dwell there where the universal soul, unconcerned with earthly needs, has ever dwelt. For the container of the total of things must be a self-sufficing entity, and remain so. In its periods, it is wrought out to purpose under its reason principles, which are perdurably valid. By these periods, it reverts unfailingly, in the measured stages of defined life duration, to its established character. It is leading the things of this realm to be of one voice and plan with the Supreme. And thus the cosmic content is carried forward to its purpose, everything in its coordinate place, under one only reason principle, operating alike in the descent and return of souls and to every purpose of the system. We may know this also by the concordance of the souls with the ordered scheme of the cosmos. They are not dependent, but by their descent they have put themselves in contact, and they stand henceforth in the harmonious association with the cosmic circuit, to the extent that their fortunes, their life experiences, their choosing and refusing are announced by the patterns of the stars, and out of this concordance rises, as it were, one musical utterance. The music, the harmony by which all is described, is the best witness to this truth. Such a consonance can have been procured in one only way. The all must, in every detail of act and experience, be an expression of the Supreme, which must dominate alike its periods and its stable ordering, and the life careers varying with the movement of the souls, as they are sometimes absorbed in that highest, sometimes in the heavens, sometimes turned to the things and places of our earth. All that is divine intellect will rest eternally above, and could never fall from its sphere, but, poised entire in its own high place, will communicate to things here through the channel of soul. Soul, in virtue of neighborhood, is more closely modeled upon the idea uttered by the divine intellect, and thus is able to produce order in the movement of the lower realm, one phase, the world soul, maintaining the unvarying march of the cosmic circuit, the other, the soul of the individual, adapting itself to times and seasons. The depth of the descent also will differ, sometimes lower, sometimes less low, and this even in its entry into any given kind. All that is fixed is that each several soul descends to a recipient indicated by affinity of condition. It moves towards the thing which it there resembled, and enters accordingly into the body of man or animal. 13. The ineluctable, the cosmic law is, thus, rooted in a natural principle under which each several entity is overruled to go, duly and in order, towards that place and kind to which it characteristically tends, that is, towards the image of its primal choice and constitution. In that archetypal world, every form of soul is near to the image, the thing in the world of copy, to which its individual constitution inclines it. There is therefore no need of a sender or leader acting at the right moment to bring it at the right moment, whether into a body or into a definitely appropriate body. Of its own motion, it descends at the precisely true time and enters where it must. To every soul its own hour. When that strikes, it descends and enters the body suitable to it, as at the cry of a herald. Thus all is set, stirring and advancing as by a magician's power, or by some mighty traction. It is much as, in any living thing, the soul itself effects the fulfillment of the natural career, stirring and bringing forth in due season every element, beard, horn, and all the successive stages of tendency and of output, or as it leads a tree through its normal course within set periods. The souls go forth neither under compulsion nor free will, or at least freedom. Here is not to be regarded as action upon preference. It is more like such a leap of the nature as moves men to the instinctive desire of sexual union, or, in the case of some, to fine conduct. The motive lies elsewhere than in the reason. Like is designed unfailingly to like, and each moves hither or thither at its fixed moment. Even the intellectual principle, which is before all the cosmos, has it also, its destiny, that of abiding intact above, and of giving downwards. What it sends down is the particular whose existence is implied in the law or decreed system of the universal. For the universal broods closely over the particular. It is not from without that the law derives the power by which it is executed. On the contrary, the law is given in the entities upon whom it falls. These bear it about with them. Let but the moment arrive, and what it decrees will be brought to act by those beings in whom it resides. They fulfill it because they contain it. It prevails because it is within them. It becomes like a heavy burden and sets up in them a painful longing to enter the realm to which they are bidden from within. 14. Thus it comes about that this cosmos, lit with many lights, gleaming in its souls, receives still further graces, gives from here and from there, from the gods of the supreme, and from those under intellectual principles, whose nature it is to ensoul. This is probably the secret of the myth in which, after Prometheus had molded woman, the other gods heaped gifts upon her. Hephaestus blending the clay with moisture and bestowing the human voice in the form of a goddess, Aphrodite bringing her gifts and the graces theirs, and other gods other gifts, and finally calling her by the name Pandora, which tells of gift and of all giving, for all have added something to this formation brought to being by a Promethean, a forethinking power. As for the rejection of Prometheus' gift by afterthought, Epimetheus, what can this signify but that the wiser choice is to remain in the intellectual realm? Pandora's creator is fettered, to signify that he is in some sense held by his own creation. Such a fettering is external, and the release by Hercules tells that there is power in Prometheus, so that he need not remain in bonds. Take the myth as we may, it is certainly such an account of the bestowal of gifts upon the cosmos as harmonizes with our explanation of the universal system. 15. The souls, peering forth from the intellectual realm, descend first to the heavens, and there put on a body. This becomes at once the medium by which, as they reach out more and more towards magnitude, physical extension, they proceed to bodies progressively more earthy. Some even plunge from heaven to the very lowest of the corporeal forms. Others pass, stage by stage, too feeble to lift towards the higher the burden they carry, weighed downwards by their heaviness and forgetfulness. As for the differences among them, these are due to variation in the bodies entered, or to the accidents of life, or to upbringing, or to inherent peculiarities of temperament, or to all these influences together, or to specific combinations of them. Then again, some have fallen unreservedly into the power of the destiny ruling here. Some, yielding betimes, are betimes to their own. There are those who, while they accept what must be borne, have the strength of self-mastery in all that is left to their own act. They have given themselves to another dispensation. They live by the code of the aggregate of beings, the code which is woven out of the reason principles and all the other causes ruling in the cosmos, out of the soul movements and out of laws springing in the supreme. A code, therefore, consonant with those higher existences founded upon them, linking their sequence back to them, keeping unshakably true all that is capable of holding itself set towards the divine nature, and leading round by all appropriate means whatsoever is less natively apt. In fine, all diversity of condition in the lower spheres is determined by the descendant being themselves. 16. The punishment justly overtaking the wicked must therefore be ascribed to the cosmic order which leads all in accordance with the right. But what of chastisements, poverty, illness, falling upon the good outside of all justice? These events will be told are equally interwoven into the world order and fall under prediction, and must consequently have a cause in the general reason. Are they therefore to be charged to past misdoing? No. Such misfortunes do not answer to reasons established in the nature of things. They're not laid up in the master facts of the universe, but were merely accidental sequence. A house falls, and anyone that chances to be underneath is killed, no matter what sort of man he be. 2 squadrons of cavalry are moving in perfect order, or one if you like, but anything getting in the way is wounded or trampled down. Or we may reason that the undeserved stroke can be no evil to the sufferer in view of the beneficent interweaving of the all, or again, no doubt, that nothing is unjust that finds justification in a past history. We may not think of some things being fitted into a system with others abandoned to the capricious. If things must happen by cause, by natural sequences, under one reason principle and a single set scheme, we must admit that the minor equally with the major is fitted into that order and pattern. Wrongdoing from man to man is wrong in the doer and must be imputed, but as belonging to the established order of the universe is not a wrong even as regards the innocent sufferer. It is a thing that had to be, and if the sufferer is good, the issue is to his gain. For we cannot think that this ordered combination proceeds without God and justice. We must take it to be precise in the distribution of due, while yet the reasons of things elude us, and to our ignorance the scheme presents matter of censure. 17. Various considerations explain why the souls going forth from the intellectual proceed first to the heavenly regions. The heavens, as the noblest portion of sensible space, would border with the least exalted of the intellectual, and will therefore be first ensouled, first to participate as most apt, while what is of earth is at the very extremity of progression, least endowed towards participation, remotest from the unembodied. All the souls then shine down upon the heavens and spend there the main of themselves and the best. Only their lower phases illuminate the lower realms, and those souls which descend deepest show their light furthest down, not themselves the better for the depth to which they have penetrated. There is, we may put it, something that is center about it, a circle of light shed from it, round center and first a circle alike, another circle light from light, outside that again not another circle of light, but one which, lacking light of its own, must borrow. The last we may figure to ourselves as a revolving circle, or rather a sphere, of a nature to receive light from that third realm, its next higher, in proportion to the light which that itself receives. The soul begins with the great light, shining self-centered, in accordance with the reigning plan, that of emanation. This gives forth its brilliance. The later divine existence souls add their radiation, some of them remaining above, while there are some that are drawn further downward, attracted by the splendor of the object they illuminate. These last find that their charges need more and more care. The steersman of a storm-tossed ship is so intent on saving it that he forgets his own interest and never thinks that he is recurrently in peril of being dragged down with the vessel. Similarly, the souls are intent upon contriving for their charges and finally come to be pulled down by them. They are fettered in bonds of sorcery, gripped and held by their concern for the realm of nature. If every living being were of the character of the all, perfect, self-sufficing, in peril from no outside influence, the soul now spoken of as indwelling would not occupy the body. It would infuse life while clinging entire within the Supreme. 18. There remains still something to be said on the question whether the soul uses deliberate reason before its descent, and again when it has left the body. Reasoning is for the sphere. It is the act of the soul fallen into perplexity, distracted with cares, diminished in strength. The need of deliberation goes with the less self-sufficing intelligence. Craftsmen faced by a difficulty, stop to consider. Where there is no problem, their artworks on by its own forthright power. But if souls in the Supreme operate without reasoning, how can they be called reasoning souls? One answer might be that they have the power of deliberating to happy issue, should occasion arise. But all is meant by defining the particular kind of reasoning intended. We may represent to ourselves a reasoning that flows uninterruptedly from the intellectual principle in them, an inherent state, an enduring activity, an assertion that is real. In this way, they would be users of reason even when in that overworld. We certainly cannot think of them, it seems to me, as employing words when, though they may occupy bodies in the heavenly region, they are essentially in the intellectual. And very surely the deliberation of doubt and difficulty which they practice here must be unknown to them there. All their act must fall into place by sheer force of their nature. There can be no question of commanding or taking counsel. They will know, each, what is to be communicated from another, by present consciousness. Even in our own case here, eyes often know what is not spoken, and there all is pure. Every being is, as it were, an eye. Nothing is concealed or sophisticated. There's no need of speech. Everything is seen and known. As for the celestials, the daemons, and souls in the air, they may well use speech, for all such are simply animate beings. 19. Are we to think of the indivisible phase of the soul and the divided as making one thing in a coalescence, or is the indivisible in a place of its own and under conditions of its own, the divisible being a sequent upon it, a separate part of it, as distinct as the reasoning phase is from the unreasoning? The answer to this question will emerge when we make plain the nature and function to be attributed to each. The indivisible phase is mentioned in the passage of Plato without further qualification, but not so the divisible. That soul, we read, which becomes divisible in bodies, and even this last is presented as becoming partible, not as being so once for all. In bodies, we must then satisfy ourselves as to what form of soul is required to produce life in the corporeal, and what there must be of soul present throughout such a body, such a completed organism. Now, every sensitive power, by the fact of being sensitive throughout, tends to become a thing of parts, present at every distinct point of sensitiveness. It may be thought of as divided, in the sense, however, that it is present as a whole at every such point. It cannot be said to be wholly divided. It becomes divisible in body. We may be told that no such partition is implied in any sensation but those of touch. But this is not so. Where the participant is body, of itself insensitive and non-transmitting, that divisibility in the sensitive agent will be a condition of all other sensations, though in less degree than in the case of touch. Similarly, the vegetative function in the soul, with that of growth, indicates divisibility, and admitting such locations as that of desire at the liver and emotional activity at the heart, we have the same result. It is to be noted, however, as regards these, the less corporeal sensations, that the body may possibly not experience them as a fact of the conjoint thing, but in another mode, as rising within some one of the elements of which it has been participant, as inherent purely in some phase of the associated soul. Reasoning and the act of the intellect, for instance, are not vested in the body. Their task is not accomplished by means of the body, which in fact is detrimental to any thinking on which it is allowed to intrude. Thus, the indivisible phase of the soul stands distinct from the divisible. They do not form a unity, but on the contrary, a whole consisting of parts, each part a self-standing thing having its own peculiar virtue. Nonetheless, if that phase which becomes divisible in body holds indivisibility by communication from the superior power, then this one same thing, the soul and body, may be at once indivisible and divisible. It will be, as it were, a blend, a thing made up of its own divisible self, with, in addition, the quality that it derives from above itself. 20. Here a question rises to which we must find an answer. Whether these and the other powers which we call parts of the soul are situated all in place, or whether some have place and standpoint, others not, or whether again none are situated in place. The matter is difficult. If we do not allot to each of the parts of the soul some form of place, but leave all unallocated, no more within the body than outside it, we leave the body soulless and are at a loss to explain plausibly the origins of acts performed by means of the bodily organs. If, on the other hand, we suppose some of these phases to be capable of situation in place, but others not so, we will be supposing that those parts to which we deny place are ineffective in us, or in other words, that we do not possess our entire soul. This simply shows that neither the soul entire nor any part of it may be considered to be within the body as in a space. Space is a container of body. It is the home of such things as consist of isolated parts, and is never, therefore, found whole in any part. Now the soul is not a body, and is no more contained than containing. Neither is it in body as in some vessel. Whether a vessel or as place of location, the body would remain in itself unensouled. If we are to think of some passing over from the soul, that self-gathered thing, to the containing vessel, then soul is diminished by just as much as the vessel takes. Space, again, in the strict sense, is unembodied, and is not itself body. Why then should it need soul? Besides, if the soul were contained as in space, contact would be only at the surface of the body, not throughout the entire mass. Many other considerations equally refute the notion that the soul is in body as an object in space. For example, this space would be shifted with every moment, and a thing itself would carry its own space about. Of course, if by space we understand the intervals separating objects, it is still less possible that the soul be in body as in space. Such a separating interval must be a void. But body is not a void. The void must be that in which body is placed. Body, not soul, will be in the void. Nor can it be in the body as in some substratum. Anything in a substratum is a condition of affecting that, a color, a form, but the soul is no condition of something else, is a separate existence. Nor is it present as part in the whole. Soul is no part of body. If we are asked to think of soul as a part in the living total, we are faced with the old difficulty, how it is in that whole. It is certainly not there as the wine is in the wine jar, or as the jar in the jar, or as some absolute is self-present. Nor can the presence be that of a whole in its part. It would be absurd to think of the soul as a total of which the body should represent the parts. It is not present as form is in matter, for the form, as in matter, is inseparable. And further, if something superimposed upon an already existing thing, soul, on the contrary, is that which engenders the form residing within the matter, and therefore is not the form. If the reference is not to the form actually present, but to form as a thing existing apart from all formed objects, it is hard to see how such an entity has found its way into body, and at any rate this makes the soul separable. How comes it then that everyone speaks of soul as being in body? Because the soul is not seen and the body is. We perceive the body, and by its movement and sensation we understand that it is ensouled, and we say that it possesses a soul. To speak of residence is a natural sequence. If the soul were visible, an object of the senses radiating throughout the entire life, if it were manifest in full force to the very outermost surface, we would no longer speak of soul as in body. We would say the minor was within the major, the contained within the container, the fleeting within the perdurable. 21. What does all this come to? What answer do we give to any who, with no opinion of his own to assert, asks us to explain this presence? And what do we say to the question whether there is one only mode of presence of the entire soul, or different modes, phase and phases? Of the modes currently accepted for the presence of one thing in another, none really meets the case of the soul's relation to the body. Thus we're given as a parallel the steersman in the ship. This serves adequately to indicate that the soul is potentially separable, but the mode of presence, which is what we're seeking, it does not exhibit. We can imagine it within the body in some incidental way, for example, as a voyager in a ship, but scarcely as the steersman. And of course, too, the steersman is not omnipresent to the ship as the soul is to the body. May we perhaps compare it to the science or skill that acts through its appropriate instruments, through a helm, let us say, which should happen to be a live thing, so that the soul, effecting the movements dictated by the seamanship, is an indwelling, directive force? No, the comparison breaks down, since the science is something outside of helm and ship. Is it any help to adopt the illustration of the steersman taking the helm, and to station the soul within the body, as the steersman may be thought to be within the material instrument through which he works? Soul, whenever and wherever it chooses to operate, does in much that way move the body. No, even in this parallel, we have no explanation of the mode of presence within the instrument. We cannot be satisfied without further search, a closer approach. 22. May we think that the mode of the soul's presence to body is that of the presence of light to the air? This certainly is presence with distinction. The light penetrates through and through, but nowhere coalesces. The light is the stable thing. The air flows in and out. When the air passes beyond the lit area, it is dark. Under the light, it is lit. There are, therefore, certain soul powers whose presence to body must be denied. The phases present are those which the nature of body demands. They are present without being resident, either in any parts of the body or in the body as a whole. For the purposes of sensation, the sensitive phase of the soul is present to the entire sensitive being. For the purposes of act, differentiation begins. Every soul phase operates at a point peculiar to itself. 23. I explain. A living body is illuminated by soul. Each organ and member participates in soul after some manner peculiar to itself. The organ is adapted to a certain function, and this fitness is the vehicle of the soul faculty under which the function is performed. Thus the seeing faculty acts through the eyes, the hearing faculty through the ears, the tasting faculty through the tongue, the faculty of smelling through the nostrils, and the faculty of sentient touch is present throughout, since in this particular form of perception the entire body is an instrument in the soul's service. The vehicles of touch are at the ends of the nerves, which, moreover, are vehicles of the faculty by which the movements of the living being are affected. In them the soul faculty concerned makes itself present. The nerves start from the brain. The brain, therefore, has been considered as the center and seat of the principle which determines feeling and impulse and the entire act of the organism as a living thing. Where the instruments are found to be linked, there the operating faculty is assumed to be situated. But it would be wiser to say only that there is situated the first activity of the operating faculty. The power to be exercised by the operator, in keeping with the particular instrument, must be considered as concentrated at that point at which the instrument is to be first applied. Or, since the soul's faculty is of universal scope, the sounder statement is that the point of origin of the instrument is the point of origin of the act. Now, the faculty presiding over sensation and impulse is vested in the sensitive and representative soul. It draws upon the reason principle immediately above itself. Downward, it is in contact with an inferior of its own. On this analogy, the uppermost member of the living being was taken by the ancients to be obviously its seat. They lodged it in the brain, or not exactly in the brain, but in that sensitive part which is the medium through which the reason principle impinges upon the brain. They saw that something must be definitely allocated to body, at the point most receptive of the act of reason, while something utterly isolated from body must be in contact with that superior thing which is a form of soul, and not merely of the vegetative or the other quasi-corporeal forms, but of that soul apt to the appropriation of the perceptions originating in the reason principle. Such a linking there must be, since in the perception there is some element of judging, in representation something intuitional, and since impulse and appetite derive from representation and reason. The reasoning faculty, therefore, is present where these experiences occur, present not as in a place, but in the fact that what is there draws upon it. As regards perception, we have already explained in what sense it is local. But every living being includes the vegetable principle, that principle of growth and nourishment which maintains the organism by means of the blood. This nourishing medium is contained in the veins. The veins and blood have their origin in the liver. From observation of these facts, the power concerned was assigned a place. The phase of the soul, which has to do with desire, was allocated to the liver. Certainly what brings to birth and nourishes and gives growth must have the desire of these functions. Blood, subtle, light, swift, pure, is the vehicle most apt to animal spirit. The heart, then, its wellspring, the place where such blood is sifted into being, is taken as the fixed center of the ebullition of the passionate nature. 24. Now comes the question of the soul leaving the body. Where does it go? It cannot remain in this world where there is no natural recipient for it, and it cannot remain attached to anything not of character to hold it. It can be held here when only it is less than wise, containing within itself something of that which lures it. If it does contain any such alien element, it gives itself with increasing attachment to the sphere to which that element naturally belongs and tends. The space open to the soul's resort is vast and diverse. The difference will come by the double force of the individual condition and of the justice reigning in things. No one can ever escape the suffering entailed by ill deeds done. The divine law is ineluctable, carrying bound up as one with it the foreordained execution of its doom. The sufferer, all unaware, is swept onward towards his due, hurried always by the restless driving of his errors, until at last, wearied out by that against which he struggled, he falls into his fit place and, by self-chosen movement, is brought to the lot he never chose. And the law decrees also the intensity and the duration of the suffering, while it carries with it, too, the lifting of chastisement and the faculty of rising from those places of pain, all by power of the harmony that maintains the universal scheme. Souls body-bound are apt to body punishment. Clean souls, no longer drawing to themselves at any point any vestige of body, are by their very being outside the bodily sphere, body-free, containing nothing of body. There were essences and being and the divine within the divinity. Among those within that, such a soul must be. If you still ask where, you must ask where those beings are, and in your seeking, seek otherwise than with the sight, and not as one seeking for body. 25. Now comes the question, equally calling for an answer, whether those souls that have quitted the places of earth retain memory of their lives, all souls or some of all things, or of some things, and again, forever or merely for some period not very long after their withdrawal. A true investigation of this matter requires us to establish first what a remembering principle must be. I do not mean what memory is, but in what order of beings it can occur. The nature of memory has been indicated, labored even elsewhere. We still must try to understand more clearly what characteristics are present where memory exists. Now, a memory has to do with something brought into ken from without, something learned or something experienced. The memory principle, therefore, cannot belong to such beings as are immune from experience and from time. No memory, therefore, can be ascribed to any divine being, or to the authentic existent, or to the intellectual principle. These are intangibly immune. Time does not approach them. They possess eternity centered around being. They know nothing of past and sequent. All is an unbroken state of identity, no receptive of change. Now, a being rooted in unchanging identity cannot entertain memory, since it has not and never had a state of differing from any previous state, or any new intellection following upon a former one, so as to be aware of contrast between a present perception and one remembered from before. But what prevents such a being from possessing memory in the sense of perceiving, without variation in itself, such outside change as, for example, the cosmic periods? Simply the fact that following the changes of the revolving cosmos, it would have perception of earlier and later. Intuition and memory are distinct. We cannot hold its self-intellections to be acts of memory. This is no question of something entering from without, to be grasped and held on fear of an escape. If its intellections could slip away from it, as a memory might, its very essence, as the hypostasis of inherent intellection, would be in peril. For the same reason, memory, in the current sense, cannot be attributed to the soul in connection with the ideas inherent in its essence. These it holds not as a memory, but as a possession, though by its very entrance into this sphere, they are no longer the mainstay of its act. The sole action which is to be observed seems to have induced the ancients to ascribe memory and recollection, the Platonic anamnesis, to souls bringing into outward manifestation the ideas they contain. We see at once that the memory here indicated is another kind. It is a memory outside of time. But perhaps this is treating too summarily a matter which demands minute investigation. It might be doubted whether that recollection, that memory, really belongs to the highest soul and not rather to another, a dimmer, or even to be the couplement, the living being. And if to that dimmer soul, when and how has it come to be present? If to the couplement, again, when and how? We are driven thus to inquire into these several points, in which of the constituents of our nature is memory vested, the question with which we started, if in the soul, then in what power or part? If in the animate or couplement, which has been supposed to similarly to be the seat of sensation, then by what mode it is present and how we are to define the couplement. Finally, whether sensation and intellectual acts may be ascribed to one and the same agent, or imply two distinct principles. 26. Now, if sensations of the active order depend upon the couplement of soul and body, sensation must be at that double nature. Hence it is classed as one of the shared acts. The soul in the feeling may be compared to the workman in such operations as boring or weaving, the body to the tool employed. The body is passive and menial, the soul is active, reading such impressions as are made upon the body or discerned by means of the body, perhaps entertaining only a judgment formed as the result of the bodily experiences. In such a process, it is at once clear that the sensation is a shared task, but the memory is not thus made over to the couplement, since the soul has from the first taken over the impression either to retain or to reject. It might be ventured that memory, no less than sensation, is a function of the couplement, on the ground that bodily constitution determines our memories, good or bad. But the answer would come that, whether the body happens or not to be a hindrance, the act of remembering would still be an act of the soul. And in the case of matters learned and not merely felt or corporally experienced, how can we think of the couplement of soul and body as the remembering principle? Here, surely, it must be soul alone. We may be told that the living being is a couplement in the sense of something entirely distinct, formed from the two elements, so that it might have memory, though neither soul nor body had it. But, to begin with, it is absurd to class the living being as neither body nor soul. These two things cannot so change as to make a distinct third, nor can they blend so utterly that the soul shall become a mere potentiality in the animate whole. And further, supposing they could so blend, memory would still be due to the soul, just as in honey wine, all the sweetness will be due to the honey. It may be suggested that while the soul is perhaps not in itself a remembering principle, yet that, having lost its purity and acquired some degree of modification by its presence in body, it becomes capable of reproducing the imprints of sensible objects and experiences, and that, seated, as roughly speaking it is, within the body, it may reasonably be thought capable of accepting such impressions, and in such a manner as to retain them, thus, in some sense, possessing memory. But, to begin with, these imprints are not magnitudes, are not of corporeal nature at all. There is no resemblance to seal impressions, no stamping of a resistant matter, for there is neither the down thrust, as of the seal, nor the acceptance, as in the wax. The process is entirely of the intellect, though exercised upon things of sense, and what kind of resistance or other physical action can be affirmed in matters of the intellectual order, or what need can there be of the body or bodily quality as a means? Further, there is one order of which the memory must obviously belong to the soul. It alone can remember its own movements. For example, its desires and those frustrations of desire in which the coveted thing never came to the body. The body can have nothing to tell about things which never approached it, and the soul cannot use the body as a means to the remembrance of what the body by its nature cannot know. If the soul is to have any significance, to be a definite principle with a function of its own, we are forced to recognize two orders of fact. An order in which the body is a means, but all culminates in soul, and an order in which is of the soul alone. This being admitted, aspiration will belong to soul, and so, as a consequence, will that memory of the aspiration and of its attainment or frustration, without which the soul's nature would fall into the category of the unstable, that is to say, of the undivine, unreal. Deny this character of the soul, and at once we refuse it perception, consciousness, any power of comparison, almost any understanding. Yet these powers of which, embodied, it becomes the source, cannot be absent from its own nature. On the contrary, it possesses certain activities to be expressed in various functions, whose accomplishment demands bodily organs. At its entry, it brings with it, as vested in itself alone, the powers necessary for some of these functions, while in the case of others it brings the very activities themselves. Memory, in point of fact, is impeded by the body, even as things are. Addition often brings forgetfulness, With thinning and clearing away, memory will often revive. The soul is a stability. The shifting and fleeting thing which body is can be a cause only of its forgetting, not of its remembering. Length, stream, may be understood in this sense, and memory is a fact of the soul. 27. But of what soul? Of that which we envisage as the more divine, by which we are human beings, or that other which springs from the all? Memory must be admitted in both of these, personal memories and shared memories, and when the two souls are together, the memories also are one. When they stand apart, assuming that both exist and endure, each soon forgets the other's affairs, retaining for a longer time its own. Thus, it is that the shade of Hercules in the lower regions, this shade, as I take it, being the characteristically human part, remembers all the action and experience of the life, since that career was mainly of the hero's personal shaping. The other souls, soul phase, going to constitute the joint being, could, for all their different standing, have nothing to recount but the events of that same life, doings which they knew from the time of their association. Perhaps they would add also some moral judgment. What the Hercules standing outside the shade spoke of we are not told. What can we think that other, the freed and isolated soul, would recount? The soul which still drags a burden will tell of all the human did and felt, but upon death there will appear, as time passes, memories of the lives lived before, some of the events of the most recent life being dismissed as trivial. As it grows away from the body, it will revive things forgotten in the corporeal state, and if it passes in and out of one body after another, it will tell over the events of the discarded life. It will treat as present that which it has just left, and it will remember much from the former existence. But with lapse of time, it will come to forgetfulness of many things that were mere accretion. Then, free and alone at last, what will it have to remember? The answer to that question depends on our discovering in what faculty of the soul memory resides. 28. Is memory vested in the faculty by which we perceive and learn? Or do we remember objects of desire with the desiring faculty and objects of anger with the passionate faculty? This will be maintained on the ground that there could scarcely be both a first faculty in direct action and a second to remember what the first experiences. It is certain that the desiring faculty is apt to be stirred by what it has once enjoyed. The object presents itself again. Evidently, memory is at work. Why else? The same object with the same attraction? But at that, we might reasonably ascribe to the desiring faculty the very perception of the desired objects, and then the desire itself to the perceptive faculty, and so on all through, and in the end conclude that the distinctive names merely indicate the function which happens to be uppermost. Yet the perception is very different from faculty to faculty. Certainly it is sight and not desire that sees the object. Desire is stirred merely as a result of the seeing by a transmission. Its act is not in the nature of an identification of an object seen. All is simply blind response, automatic reaction. Similarly with rage, sight reveals the offender and the passion leaps. We may think of a shepherd seeing a wolf at his flock and a dog seeing nothing, who springs to the scent or the sound. In other words, the desiring faculty has had the emotion, but the trace it keeps of the event is not a memory. It is a condition, something passively accepted. There is another faculty that was aware of the enjoyment and retains the memory of what has happened. This is confirmed by the fact that many satisfactions which the desiring faculty has enjoyed are not retained in the memory. If memory resided in the desiring faculty, such forgetfulness could not be. 29. Are we then to refer memory to the perceptive faculty and so make one principle of our nature the seat of both awareness and remembrance? Now supposing the very shade, as we were saying in the case of Hercules, has memory, then the perceptive faculty is twofold. And even if the faculty that remembers is not the faculty that perceives, but some other thing, the remembering faculty is twofold. And further, if the memory deals with matters learned, the perceptive faculty, in order to be identical with memory, will be concerned with thoughts as well as with matters of observation and feeling. But these two orders certainly require two separate faculties. Must we then suppose a common faculty of apprehension, one covering both sense perceptions and ideas, and assign memory in both orders to this? The solution might serve if there were one and the same percipient for objects of sense and objects of the intellectual kind. But if these stand in definitely duality, then, for all we can say or do, we are left with two separate principles of memory. And supposing each of the two orders of soul to possess both principles, then we have four. And on general grounds, what compelling reason is there that the principle by which we perceive should be the principle by which we remember, that these two acts should be vested in the one faculty? Why must the seed of our intellectual action be also the seed of our remembrance of that action? The most powerful thought does not always go with the readiest memory. People of equal perception are not equally good at remembering. Some are specially gifted in perception, others, never swift to grasp, are strong to retain. But once more, admitting two distinct principles, something quite separate, remembering what sense perception has first known, still this something must have felt what it is required to remember. No, we may well conceive that where there is to be memory of a sense perception, this perception becomes a mere presentment, and that to this image-grasping power, a distinct thing, belongs the memory, the retention of the object. For in this imaging faculty, the perception culminates, the impression passes away, but the vision remains present to the imagination. By the fact of harboring the presentment of an object that has disappeared, the imagination is, at once, a seat of memory. Where the persistence of the image is brief, the memory is poor. People of powerful memory are those in whom this image-holding power is firmer, not easily allowing the record to be jostled out of its grip. Remembrance, thus, is vested in the imaging faculty, and memory deals with images. Its differing quality or degree from man to man we would explain by difference or similarity in the strength of the individual powers, by conduct like or unlike, by bodily conditions present or absent, producing change and disorder or not. A point this, however, which need not detain us here. 30. But what of the memory of mental acts? Do these all fall under the imaging faculty? If every mental act is accompanied by an image, we may well believe that this image, fixed and like a picture of the thought, would explain how we remember the object of knowledge once entertained. But if there is no such necessary image, another solution must be sought. Perhaps memory would be the reception into the image-making faculty of the verbal formula which accompanies the mental conception. This mental conception, an indivisible thing, and one that never rises to the exterior of the consciousness, lies unknown below. The verbal formula, the revealer, the bridge between the concept and the image-taking faculty, exhibits the concept as in a mirror. The apprehension by the image-taking faculty would thus constitute the enduring presence of the concept, would be our memory of it. This explains also another fact. The soul is unfailingly intent upon intellection. Only when it acts upon this image-making faculty does its intellection become a human perception. Intellection is one thing. The perception of an intellection is another. We are continuously intuitive, but we are not unbrokenly aware. The reason is that the recipient in us receives from both sides, absorbing not merely intellections, but also sense perceptions. 31. But if each of the two phases of the soul, as we have said, possesses memory, and memory is vested in the imaging faculty, there must be two such faculties. Now that is all very well as long as the two souls stand apart. But when they are at one in us, what becomes of the two faculties, and in which of them is memory vested? If each soul has its own imaging faculty, the images must in all cases be duplicated, since we cannot think that one faculty deals only with intellectual objects and the other with objects of sense, a distinction which inevitably implies the coexistence in man of two life principles utterly unrelated. And if both orders of image act upon both orders of soul, what difference is there in the souls, and how does the fact escape our knowledge? The answer is that when the two souls chime each with each, the two imaging faculties no longer stand apart. The union is dominated by the imaging faculty of the higher soul, and thus the image perceived is as one. The less powerful is like a shadow attending upon the dominant, like a minor light merging into a greater. When they are in conflict, in discord, the minor is distinctly apart, a self-standing thing, though its isolation is not perceived, for the simple reason that the separate being of the two souls escapes observation. The two have run into a unity in which yet one is the loftier. This loftier knows all. When it breaks from the union, it retains some of the experiences of its companion, but dismisses others. Thus we accept the talk of our less valued associates, but on a change of company, we remember little from the first set and more from those in whom we recognize a higher quality. 32. But the memory of friends, children, wife, country too, and all the better sort of men may reasonably remember. All these, the one, the lower man, retains with emotion, the authentic man passively. For the experience certainly was first felt in that lower phase from which, however, the best of such impressions pass over to the graver soul in the degree in which the two are in communication. The lower soul must be always striving to attain to memory of the activities of the higher. This will be especially so when it is itself of a fine quality, for there will always be some that are better from the beginning and bettered here by the guidance of the higher. The loftier, on the contrary, must desire to come to a happy forgetfulness of all that has reached it through the lower. For one reason, there's always the possibility that the excellence of the higher goes with a baseness in the lower, which is only kept down by sheer force. In any case, the more urgent the intention towards the supreme, the more extensive will the soul's forgetfulness, unless indeed when the entire living has, even here, been such that memory has nothing but the noblest to deal with. In this world itself, all is best when human interests have been held aloof. So therefore, it must be with the memory of them. In this sense, we may truly say that the good soul is the forgetful. It flees multiplicity. It seeks to escape the unbounded by drawing all to unity, for only thus is it free from entanglement, light-footed, self-conducted. Thus it is that even in this world, the soul which has the desire of the other is putting away, amid its actual life, all that is foreign to that order. While it is in the heavenly regions, it puts away more again. Little of what it gathered here is taken with it to the intellectual realm. The Hercules of the heavenly regions would still tell of his feats, but there is the other man to whom all of that is trivial. He has been translated to a holier place. He has won his way to the intellectual realm. He is more than Hercules, proven in the combats in which the combatants are the wise. If you haven't done so yet, please do hit that like button, and if you have any friends in your social group that enjoy philosophy, share this video with them, and head over to the next video where we continue with this Fourth Ennead, Fifth Tractate on problems of the soul, or on sight.